I'm Andrew Walsh, aka Bat Phantom, from the Operation Pug podcast, proud member of the Gonna Geek Network, just like the show you're listening to now. The opinions expressed are those of each individual host. Check out all the other podcasts at GonnaGeekNetwork.com and get ready because geekiness begins in 3, 2, 1.
This is the official GonnaGeek.com show. Here we're a bunch of geeks talking about geeky things. Each week we run down the latest news and happenings in the world of geek. These are your hosts for the show, Steven.
But what if I'm in the mood for a T-Swift story?
Chris.
I've heard the X is going to give it to you.
And SP.
That's how we roll on Gonna Geek on Monday night. We get crazy!
Gonna Geek Productions presents the official GonnaGeek.com show.
Welcome to episode 238 of the official GonnaGeek.com show. I am Steven John Drew. With me, of course, is the Chris to my Farrell, Chris Farrell.
Well, Heidi ho, Captain Steven.
We've also got the P to my SP, Stargate Pioneer.
Now I gotta go pee.
Oh, man, why do you gotta go there, man? I
got a bottle if you need it.
Wow, that's just not...
Just pass it over, man.
It's not what I was talking about at all. But hey, yes, we're here to talk about the latest happenings in the world of geek. If you've not checked out the show before, we encourage you to come on by when we record this live on Mondays at 8:45 p.m. Eastern Time. That's at www.geeks.live. You can go ahead and check us out there. We have a live chat room. You can come heckle us. You can tell Stargate Pioneer why he's awesome, and you can tell me why I am so terrible. And you could just be like, hey, Chris, you're neutral.
I am chaotic neutral, though.
Like stuck in neutral?
Yeah, man. I just can't wake up in the mornings anymore. So it's just like I'm stuck in neutral. The alarm's going beep, beep. And I'm like, no, stop. And I just don't move.
By the way, in the chat, we have one of our regular viewers, Albert Sims, and Albert Sims is letting us know that he's watching, as usual, on the YouTube Roku app. And I got to say, that's one of the reasons why I like to do the show on YouTube. And obviously, we've streamed some other places here and there over the years, but I really like YouTube because of the cross-compatibility. So if you've not tried that before, go ahead and check that out when we do stream live, because if you got the YouTube app, you can check us out when we go live. Go ahead, send us on your big TV. You know you want us on your 80-inch television. You can see all of this glory.
But the real problem is you can't watch us in glorious 4K on an Apple TV because the app doesn't support it. Note the Gonna Geek show is not in 4K and never will be because I'm too ugly for 4K video.
All right, well, let's go ahead and talk about the news. Chris Farrell, question for you.
Ask away, my friend.
When one has a phone, do they need to talk on said phone?
In today's world, not as much as you would think.
Okay, well, let's say somebody did want to talk on a phone. Do you think that they would require a microphone function on their phone?
Unless you can magically find some other way to transmit my voice over the cellular broadcast without a microphone, I would assume yes.
Yes, and so would I. But as we all know, Apple likes to shave things off from their phone here and there. They want to try to make the phone as small as it can be, and they want to be revolutionary. They want to be gutsy. What was the term that they used? Courage. They want to be courageous. That's right.
Hashtag courage.
So they had the hashtag courage to remove the microphone function from their phones. Now,
did you find an April Fool's article, Steven?
No, what it was apparently a leaked internal document that was attained by Mac Rumors is warning authorized service providers that iOS 11.3 and iOS 11.3.1 have been crippling iPhones, most notably the iPhone 7 and the iPhone 7 Plus, which are unable to use their microphone during calls or be heard at all during FaceTime chats. Now, these reports have been coming around here and there for the last little while, such as on Reddit and Twitter, and even on Apple's own wonderful support community forum, and of course on the other Mac sites. But yep, apparently this leaked document confirms that if you got an iPhone 7 or iPhone 7 Plus, you might have troubles hearing somebody if you want to make a phone call. So there you go. They've had the courage to remove the phone function from their iPhone.
It's simple, Steven. You're just updating your OS the wrong way.
Is that before or after the iPhone explodes?
You know what? It doesn't. Yeah, it's probably after. So then you can't call for help.
That's right. So we know that Apple iPhones had the same battery problem as Samsung. They just paid their users off to not say anything about it. We know that. We reported that.
Yeah, this is alarming because if it has to get to the point that people are bringing it in to get it fixed, that means that it's not an easy fix, and thus people, how are they going to report their claim if they need to call support desk?
Steven, have you tried to turn it off and turn it on again?
No, but seriously, think about it. So how do you deal with this? You either want to phone in or you want to email in. So if you're having problems with using the microphone function, there goes your phone in option.
Yeah, that's problematic. But this is interesting. This is the second round of weird Apple issues I've been hearing about today, because during my lunch break today, I saw an article on the iPhone 10 Face ID camera that was having troubles, and people were taking phones to stores, and the replacement information that Apple gives them for their techs is to replace the cameras on the back side of the phone to potentially fix Face ID. So I'm kind of scratching my head going, wait, how do the cameras not involved in identifying my face have anything to do with the Face ID camera not working? And evidently that fixes some of them, and they're having to replace iPhone 10s that have faulty Face ID cameras right now. So this is really weird. I wonder if they're both consequences of this recent iOS update.
That's obviously because you are holding it wrong, Chris.
Yes.
Well, it could be.
Oh, this is insane to me, that they're having such critical problems. You think that the 10, especially, like features on the 10 would be so well vetted at this point, because they still are trying to sell those things.
The problem is it's new tech, and you always see with new tech, there's going to be a bit of an issue where it might not work as you expect. And as you get a little longer into the development, into the usage cycle with that new tech, you start to see breakages associated with wear and usage, and maybe that's part of what's going on. If you're an early adopter, and you are if you got iPhone 10 to get Face ID, this is one of the risks you run, is that the stuff doesn't quite work right. You're not quite a beta tester, but you're close enough to being a beta tester, basically.
That's true. The phone functions are very new. So
that is true. I mean, worst comes to worst, just get 2 soup cans and a rope and you'll be fine.
That's right. We should just fall back to that. Maybe just get the old telegrams out, or the singograms. What are the singograms?
That's what you can do. I know how to do this. You can just use Morse code by using keypad presses. So bring up the number pad on there, and you can use Morse code to do yes or no or SOS. The hell with this headphone jack. Let's just go back to the older times. Let's go back to telegrams and doing things that way. I think we've got a plan here. The hell with microphones on your phone. It's now just a telegraph machine.
By the way, fun fact, you're talking about Morse code. It is named after Zach Morris. That is 100% a real fact.
Bayside High, right?
Absolutely. So if you want to get in touch with us and tell us about your problem that you're having with the phone, why don't you give us a phone call on our voicemail at 567-343-GEEK. That's 567-343-4335. You can go ahead and let us know about all of the problems you're having, or just leave us a voicemail there telling us about the problems that you're having with your iPhone telephone function. We want to hear you leave us a voicemail after those problems. Yeah, that's the joke. The joke is that you can't do that. Let's go ahead and talk a little bit about Infinity War. We are going to stay spoiler-free, don't worry. Yes, we are staying spoiler-free again this week on the show. We have all had a chance to see Infinity War now on this very program, but we are not going to talk about the show. But we do have some news about said filming of the show, and it cost a couple of bucks, right, Chris?
You mean I can't talk about the part where Henry Cavill's mustache comes to the MCU and plants itself firmly on Thanos' face?
Okay, I gotta say, Rocket Raccoon wielding actual lightsabers, amazing.
That's brand synergy right there.
That was pretty sweet. But go ahead with the information.
So Infinity War, we all know it's breaking box office records left and right. It's the fastest movie to gross $1 billion. So if you're an accountant at Marvel or Disney, you're probably pretty happy, but maybe not as happy as you might think. Guys, shock upon all shocks, this was an expensive movie to make. Joe Russo was on the Sway in the Morning show, and he was talking about Avengers Infinity War and Avengers 4, where he mentioned the fact they shot for a year straight from January to January with about 2 weeks break, stating that the costs ended up being anywhere from $350,000 to $450,000 a day to keep production running. And then he did mention at the end, oh yeah, we also ran over budget. So Infinity War, very expensive movie. Probably good they're making all the money. He was asked, one of the other Russo brothers was asked, hey, where'd all that money go? Jokingly, they said, well, we gave it all to Robert Downey. In all seriousness, a lot of it went towards visual effects and things like that, and probably the actors' salaries, because you've got to imagine taking, 27 different actors who've been in Marvel movies and dropping them all in one. It was not cheap from a salary standpoint. So a lot of industry experts are theorizing right now the combined budget for Infinity War and Avengers 4, roughly $1 billion for a production budget, which makes it one of the most expensive movies ever made, putting it well ahead of what was the most expensive movie. And this one surprised me, Pirates of the Caribbean on Stranger Tides, which cost $378.5 million. So triple that, and that's the production costs, presumably, for Avengers 3 and 4.
For 2 movies. So it's really like $500 million per one movie. And I could totally see it. I could totally see Disney going, we're just going to pay it at this point, because we've got 18 movies. We got a few more in the can already. None of them have lost money. If anything else, we just need to do this to be marquee. We just have to have this big, huge placemat of an Avengers Infinity War movie that we can do whatever we want to. I'm staying spoil free here, but they did it to do it, not necessarily to make money. Of course, they're going to try to make money, but when you get into here, I don't think they were really planning on making all the money, especially when you're talking about the cast. And you're not just talking about the 27 marquee actors, you're talking about all the secondary actors that they brought in too, Chris, and all the new actors that they brought in specifically for the movie. Not to mention the crews shooting probably multiple locations. Did the Russo brothers, did they shoot this together, or did they do like set A and set A1 throughout the shooting? Do you know?
I've heard varying rumors to both effects. I don't know what is actually true. I need to go back and read some of the interviews they've given to find out for myself. So I don't want to comment, because the only comments I give are based off of some random Reddit threads I'd read, and I'm not 100% confident that they're accurate how the movies were shot.
I hope that as we go into Avengers 4, or whatever they're going to call the next movie, that we get a lot more behind the scenes and a lot of the creative thing that went into it, whether it's from the Russo brothers themselves or whether it was from Kevin Feige. And then you got to throw Sony into the bucket here too, because they're giving Spider-Man. So there's a lot of entities involved in the creation of these films.
Right.
So
a lot of the behind the scenes stuff is starting to come out. There was an interview that I think it was Joe Russo did. He went to his old high school and did a Q&A on filmmaking and things like that, and started talking about some of the thoughts and the processes that went into Infinity War. But I don't think you're going to see a ton of that until you get the DVD release of Infinity War. And I think there's going to be some incredible extras that are going to be on that disc that talk about, I mean, if you go and look at all the Marvel movies, they have really good extras that talk about the creative process behind it, the source material they leveraged. I think there's where we're going to learn a ton of stuff, and I'm super excited for it. I mean, let's be honest though, if they paid $1 billion to do these 2 movies, they've already made back that just in 13 days. Now we're in 11 days they crossed the 1 billion mark. Well, let's be honest, there's a chance this movie could hit 2 billion worldwide. Well, there's a chance.
There's a couple of factors here, right? Like, number one, I got to say, I did like the movie. I'm not going to say any specifics around it, but I am going to say that I think I will like it more coupled with part 2. So that's something that you could bank that factor in there. All the people who are wanting to buy it before part 2, not to mention the fact that part 1 is going to be redistributed just before part 2. There's going to be a limited run at certain theaters. That's going to happen. So there's all sorts of more money to be made in this here. But speaking of spending money with this, we all know though that they probably sunk $3 billion alone in their licensing with Arrested Development. We'll just leave that alone. So there you go. Anything else to comment on this before we talk about SP's Deep Probe?
I just feel like if Steven said he liked it, I have to say I didn't like it. And if you want to know more, you can check Legends of S.H.I.E.L.D. episode number 240 out.
Cool. Chris, go ahead and say whether you liked it or not. Like, this is the way we're all in here.
I really enjoyed it. I think it's a spectacle that we're not likely to see again. It's on par with, remember the spectacle behind when the Lord of the Rings movies came out and they filmed all three back to back to back to basically put them out a year after each other, and then it built upon each other. This is a spectacle we won't see again. 17 movies building up to an epic crossover. Even the next iteration of Avengers after this fourth movie is not going to have quite that same feeling because it's not fresh. It's not new anymore. I don't care how good those ones are. You'll never be able to recapture the fact that I went into this movie and went, holy crap, how did they pull this off?
Agreed. I agree. I think that newness factor is not, it's not going to be able to happen again.
They got lucky. They did. From 2008 on, they got lucky. And if you say, oh no, they didn't know with Iron Man what they were doing, there's the post-credit scene for Iron Man that leads all the way into this. So yeah, it was in the works from the beginning.
Absolutely. All right, SP, tell me a little bit about why there's a deep probe. You're probing deeply.
Well, I'm not, but NASA is about to, yeah. So this is really 3 news stories, so hang with me. There's a lot going on with this one. So last weekend, actually, just 2 days ago, NASA launched the InSight Mars lander, and we're going to get into all the aspects of this thing. So InSight, it's short for interior exploration using seismic investigations, geodesy, and heat transport, and it began its 205-day 301 million mile journey to Mars when it launched on Cinco de Mayo at 7:05 a.m. Eastern Time, or more specifically 4:05 local California time in the middle of the night. Yes, it launched from Vandenberg Air Force Base in California on top of an Atlas V launch vehicle that was made by United Launch Alliance. Now, if this journey is successful, and I'm not going to count it successful until it's actually on the Martian surface, the mission will land on November 26th, 2018, and it's planned to set down at the Martian Elysium Planitia, which is an equatorial zone just south of an ancient volcanic area. InSight will send back data about the red planet's interior for about 1 Martian year, which turns out to be 728 Earth days. So a little bit more than 2 Earth years. Years. So the goal of InSight is not to be a rover. It's not going to roam around. It's to stay absolutely still. And that's so it can measure properties of the Martian interior. This includes seismic activity from Mars quakes and meteorite strikes, the temperature through a heat flow experiment, and the size and shape of the Martian core through analyzing wobbles in the planet as it orbits the sun. And that's all in InSight's name. Once again, it's the interior exploration using seismic investigations, geodesy, and heat transport. That is a mouthful, and don't try to say it 10 times fast.
What about 3?
Go ahead. Try it.
No. I meant you. You're the expert director of NASA.
I just did it twice, so I'll do a third time here. Interior exploration using seismic investigations, geodesy, and heat transport.
So just to clarify,
I can't believe it worked.
Yeah, it was pretty good. You set them up nicely there. But I just want to get clarification on this. That the deep probing article is about having a mouthful. What? Okay.
Yeah, we'll get to that in a second. So let's back up. NASA has sent quite a few missions to Mars and all over the solar system, and all of them have been launched from Florida in its 60-year history. So NASA's launched more than 50 spacecraft to study the solar system beyond Earth and the moon. That's the caveat, beyond Earth and the moon. And despite that long record, the agency did something that no other U.S. interplanetary probe has done before. They launched from the West Coast. Now, why is this? So it's easier to get to other planets from the East Coast, but InSight was launched from the West Coast at Vandenberg Air Force Base in California. Lovely site, by the way. If you're ever on the West Coast, you have an opportunity to tour the launch pads at Vandenberg. Go ahead and do that. And this was made possible because they launched from a more powerful Atlas V 401 rocket. And this is more powerful than the Delta II rocket, which it normally would have taken out at Cape Canaveral. So this can send the spacecraft to Mars even from the West Coast because it has more thrust. Now, the use of the East Coast launch site is normally a necessity because the Earth is rotating in a certain direction and it adds about 30 kilometers per second to the momentum of the rocket as it's going. So it's free momentum. So the Atlas added a few more kilometers per second to that, more so than it would have with a Delta II. And that's how they were able to launch from the West Coast. They didn't go over the ocean either. They didn't go straight north. They went south-southeast. So it went over land as it was launching. That's another benefit of launching from the East Coast, because you're basically launching over the ocean. So if something goes wrong, it falls in the ocean and not over land. Important notes there. But Vandenberg was ultimately chosen as the launch site because it had more availability during InSight's launch period. We talked last week about the Holman transfer and the windows of opportunity to launch to Mars. Well, this is the opportunity right now. It started on May 5th, 2018, and it runs until early June. Now, after this, you got to wait 2 years again, and that is when the Mars 2020 mission is slated for. I mentioned, by the way, that this was the only mission that was launched beyond Earth and the Moon to go from the West Coast. There was one other mission, scientific probe mission, that was launched from the West Coast, and that was Clementine. And that was a joint mission between Star Wars Office. Yes, I just did say Star Wars, the Strategic Defense Initiative Organization, or SDI, and NASA. So it was a joint mission between the two. And it lifted off for the moon on a Titan 2G rocket from Vandenberg Air Force Base on January 25th, 1994. It used a lot of the SDI technology that was being developed at the time, and it actually discovered water on the moon. Go ahead and look that up. So that was Clementine, the only other mission that went beyond Earth from the West Coast. But it didn't go beyond Earth and the moon because it went to the moon. All right, here's another little known fact about this InSight. It was originally scheduled to launch in 2016, but a slow leak in a sensitive seismometer vacuum chamber grounded the mission for 26 months. Now, the fix to the instrument and the 2-year delay added over $150 million to InSight's price tag. We'll get to the total price tag in a second. So the seismometer, which had to be fixed, is called the Seismic Experiment for Interior Structures, or SEIS, S-E-I-S, and it will detect and characterize ground-shaking events as Marsquakes and meteorite impacts. SEIS's data will help scientists better understand the red planet's crust. The other scientific instrument on board InSight is called the Heat Flow and Physics Properties Package, or HP3, and that will hammer itself up to about 16.5 feet beneath the Martian surface and measure how much heat is flowing from that depth. InSight will also conduct another investigation, and this is using the communications systems on board, and it's called the Rotation and Interior Structures Experiment. And the operators for InSight will monitor the location precisely from Earth to within just 4 inches in an attempt to spot slight wobbles in the Mars axis of rotation, and analysis of such wobbles will provide information about the Martian core, including its size. We don't know a lot about the Martian core other than it's probably a lot deader than the Earth's molten core. So the body of InSight is about 790 pounds, which is roughly, a third of this weight of or mass of a 2018 GMC Sierra 4x4 crew cab.
Of course.
InSight is basically it was based on a heavy adaptation of the Phoenix Mars lander, which detected water ice in the red planet's far north in 2008. Now, America's investment into the InSight mission is $814 million. So just a little less than 2 Marvel movies, apparently, with about 163 million of that going into launch services. So if you think in terms of SpaceX would have gotten 160 million of that 814 million to launch it. And it's not a Falcon Heavy probably could have done it. They didn't even have to go to the BFR to do it. So that's about what SpaceX actually would charge for a Falcon Heavy mission. And I would anticipate them to be used for more things like that in the future. So on top of that $814 million that the U.S. shelled out, France and Germany contributed a total between the two of $180 million, and that was primarily to develop the two scientific instruments. Now, the French provided the size, and the Germans built the HP-3. So NASA and JPL have also chipped in an additional, and this is the third part of this that's really neat, an additional $18.5 million for a historic technology demonstration called Mars Cube 1, or short for MarsCo. Now, MarsCo consists of two briefcase-size spacecraft dubbed Wall-E and Eva. Yes, that same Pixar movie, Wall-E and Eva. And they launched with InSight, but they're going to fly separately to Mars. Now, Wall-E and Eva will aim to become the first CubeSats ever to travel to another planet, potentially blazing a trail through deep space that other small, relatively cheap spacecraft could follow. Now, Wall-E and Eva may beam data about InSight's Martian entry, descent, and landing back to Earth as it's happening. Now, this is not critical to the mission, guys, because the NASA's Mars Reconnaissance Orbiter, which has been orbiting Mars since 2006, will also perform this relay work regardless of what Wall-E and Eva managed to do. What do you guys think?
Sorry, could you say that again? I forgot what you said, and my ears are still pierced from that.
Wall-E and Eva.
Oh,
yeah.
Oh, sorry, I didn't hear any of that. No, okay, cool. It is, it's the part that's surprising to me is that they're putting MACOs on Mars. That's the military people from Enterprise. That's what you said was MACOs, right?
Well, MACO is also a actual vehicle from Mass Effect.
Also true.
That's
Terrible
true.
one to drive in Mass Effect. If you
Terrible.
played it.
Absolutely.
Terrible.
Okay, so how do they decide, how do they divvy up the funds? Because that it was very disproportionate amount of money chipped in by Germany and France.
So as I saw this was originally from a request for proposals in 2010 to look at different Martian missions, and they each had to cost less than $425 million, if I'm remembering correctly. And they chose a few. This one made it all the way through. It was actually above budget. It was $546 million when they hit the snag back in 2016. They could not launch. Now, even though this leak in the vacuum chamber was so small, basically your car tire would lose a pound of pressure in there for an entire year, and it was just too much for the delicate instruments. They needed a complete vacuum, a sealed vacuum, so they had to go back, do some welds, and make sure that this thing was able to fly to Mars without springing another leak. So that took another 2 years. They did some other testing along the way. So when you consider all the manpower that went into it and the technology development and the storage and everything, it busts up from $425 million to $814 million.
Wow. Sounds like a lot of money spent, but it'll all be worth it if, as Albert Sims says, it eventually leads to him sending his ex on a one-way mission to Mars. That's what Albert Sims in her chat said, by the way. So
all of those of us with exes have thought the same thing, Albert.
And SP's made it happen. Oh!
No, I have not. Don't be putting that bad juju on me.
All right. Well, moving on to our extra news section here. Let's talk a little bit about something that we actually all encountered over the weekend, which was to do with the Logitech Harmonies. Now, if you're not familiar with the Logitech Harmonies, what they are is a universal remote that is smart. They started off as individual remotes, and then they've expanded since. Now most of them are based around what's called a Harmony Hub, which is an internet connected device, so you can do all sorts of stuff. They can integrate with your Amazon services, a whole bunch of other stuff. So the hub is generally the brain. So if you got a remote with your Harmony, the remote talks to the hub, and the hub does the controlling. Well, this past Friday, it was actually after I ended up going and seeing the Infinity War movie. Came home, I sat down, I'm like, okay, now I can go and I can catch up on my Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D., even though SP told me it was safe, I still waited. So I sat down, went to start watching at about, I don't know, whatever time it was, 9, 10 o'clock my time, and I pushed a button and the TV came on, so then I pushed another, and nothing happened. But then it did happen, and then I pushed another button, and nothing happened. And I waited a bit, and it did happen again, and it was really, really lagged. So I shut off my Harmony Hub, and I left it alone, and then I plugged it in, and it still did it. So then I unplugged it and left it off for about 5 minutes thinking, okay, this thing's overheated. So then I plugged it in and it worked fine the rest of the night. Come to find out, I wasn't the only one that had that problem. My in-laws had that problem. All my other Harmony Hubs in the house had that problem. Chris had a problem. We all had a various version of this, and sure enough, Harmony released a firmware update that apparently caused all sorts of people to have this problem. Some people couldn't get it working. Most of us just shut them off for like 5 minutes was around the golden or longer, and it seemed to work. So yeah, definitely a weird thing that happened over the weekend, especially considering how many people are using these Harmony Hubs now with smart devices.
Well, it was interesting too, because we seemingly had different kinds of delays.
Mm-hmm.
Stephen, from talking to you in the chat, you were talking like it was a 25 to 30 second delay. I kid you not, it was like a 5-minute delay on my actions. And my use case is I have it hooked into my Amazon voice services, so I can come in and say, hey, A-word, turn on the TV. So I did that and nothing happened. And I went, okay, maybe it's just in a weird state. So I said, okay, A-word, turn on the Roku. Nothing happened. I went, okay, turn on the Xbox. Nothing happened. And then I said, turn on the TV again. Nothing happened. I went, okay, well, something's screwed up here. So I busted out the remote control when I could actually find it, because I don't remember how to turn things on with the remote control because I'm completely dependent on voice cues anymore. Seriously, I had to figure out how to use my cable box remote to turn on the sound system because they weren't linked together. It didn't. I had to get up off the couch and turn it on myself. And then the weird thing is, like 5 minutes later, I got off the couch. Is that surprising?
Yeah, you get off the couch. Yeah,
that
wow.
was surprising. Yeah, we're both
It's a big
shocked.
thing. Yeah.
So I kid you not, probably about 5 or 6 minutes later, the TV, all the indicator lights come back on like it's flipping inputs. I'm like, what the hell? Then the Roku flips to the inputs, and then the Roku inputs come on. I go, the hell? Then my Xbox and turns on, and it goes to the Xbox, and then it goes back to my TV, and I went, what the hell? So literally, it sat for like 5 or 6 minutes, and then the 4 commands I had given came through just like one after another, after another, after another. And then at that point, I said, okay, something's screwy here. And I just unplugged it because we were going out to dinner. And when I came back home, it was working again. I didn't have any issues, but I got jealous when Steven's like, yeah, I got like a 30-second delay. I was like, 30 seconds? I'd kill for that.
So weird. And you know what? In all fairness, it might have gotten bad, because at least in one of the times that I unplugged it and plugged it in quickly that it didn't fix, I did end up having it where I thought it just wasn't functioning. So that might have been a 5-minute delay at that point there. I know my in-laws, the same thing. They said they tried to do something and it didn't do anything at all. But it was really weird, because if you unplugged it for not long, it didn't fix it. But when you left it unplugged for a while and then plugged it back in, it did work. So it's like something needed to get kicked off the system and detected it was offline and back on. Like, it was really weird. And I haven't read an update about this, but yes, they did put out a firmware update, and there's a lot of people, and some people have even reported that there's been problems with the API. So if it does link to, say, your Amazon voice service device or something, some people are having troubles with that. So if you have a Harmony Hub and you're encountering this problem, file a ticket if you've already tried to leave it offline for a little bit. And if you got time, go more than 5 minutes. Why not? You got nothing to lose.
Indeed. So I did have the same issue. I have 7 of those hubs in my house, and I fixed all of them by unplugging them for at least 5 minutes, plugging them back in. It was golden. And, Steven,
yeah,
I was right. You admit that I was right about Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. You could have watched it.
You could have. And I was right originally saying that they better do the big tie-in as the second one, which was the second week after Infinity War came out. There was more of a reference to it.
So you didn't trust me, and I was right.
You were right. You were absolutely right, but I wasn't taking any chances, and I was happy to wait a week because I wasn't taking any chances.
Better safe than sorry on spoilers if you don't want to be scared. I'm with Steven on this one. I probably would have believed you, but just in case, I wouldn't have done it.
All right. Well, in the extra, we also had another piece of space news, right, SB?
We did. This normally in a normal week would have been my prime story, but James Webb Space Telescope actually has a screw loose. Literally has a screw loose. So it went into vibration testing, and then afterwards it came out and they noticed screws and washers on the floor. So oops, something came loose. They did see that it had to do with the sun shield, so they got to do some investigating on that and just make sure that everything's okay for it to proceed in testing. This might produce a little bit of delay. This isn't like the Mars missions where it'll be 2 years of delay because they can really launch anytime. It's just going to a Lagrange point. It's not going to another planet.
Oh, so someone's got a screw loose at NASA. Not surprised about that at all.
Not someone, something.
Well, someone has one if there's something wrong. So somebody has built it wrong, and yes, they have a screw loose.
So you calling out NASA of not being able to build things right?
Yeah, I'm calling them incompetent. That's what I'm calling them.
I see.
Yeah.
Wow.
I know. Finally, in our extra news, Amazon Kids. How did we miss this one? We should have talked about this last week. Those of you who have been following us here on the GoodandGeek.com show, we sometimes like to talk about smart devices. This is a new thing. I know we just spent 5 minutes talking about one, but yes, we do talk about smart devices here on the GoodandGeek.com show. And all of us have wonderful Amazon Echo Dots and full sizes and various other forms of Amazon
What are you talking about, man? I don't have any of that stuff.
It's BS. So some of us that have kids often have said kids use these Amazon Echoes. In fact, let me do an impression of my kid who uses it. And by the way, mute your devices right now. I'm about to say that word.
On it.
This is how he says it. He goes, Alexa, turn on the TV. That's pretty much exactly how he sounds. So obviously I'm raising him to be rude by using these, and thus Amazon has decided that they are going to create an Amazon Echo that is for kids. Yes, that's right. There is going to be a special edition of the Echo Dot that is geared toward kids. And the idea is going to be obviously age-appropriate content. It's going to be a little more filtered. And there's also going to be an option for free time, which is going to allow parents to choose when services and skills can be used, essentially managing their time. And the bonus is with the kids, they are going to reward the kids who say please somehow, just using positive reinforcement, I'm guessing. But yeah, it's definitely a kids version of the Echo Dot coming soon, which means, Chris, you should get one for your coming soon kids.
What? It's an interesting point you brought up though about it trying to reward kids for speaking nicely to it, because there was some weird article I saw on Twitter and I kind of rolled my eyes after I started to read the beginning of it and then moved on about how this person judges people based on how they interact with their digital assistant, like with their A words, their Google Voice services and things like that, and says, if they're curt and short with them, I know that they're just not a good person or something. It's like, well, they're computers, but at the same time, I know we've all had our moments where the service frustrates us and we're curt and short with it. But I've gone back and looked and I go, I find myself, she answers something, I go, thank you, and don't even think about it and stuff like that. But I'm still not sure that how you interact with your digital assistant is really a great metric on your personal character.
Yeah, I agree with that. But I will say this, that I tried to get my kids to start saying please and stuff with it, and they started to, and then I just gave up. I'm just like, this is too much work for me. So just let them yell at it.
So just let her do it for you.
Exactly.
Chris, you say that now, but just wait a few years and these devices will start being able to take over. I mean, Skynet is coming, and it's coming right around the corner. So you better be prepared to bow down to your AI overlords.
If that's the case, because I am in trouble then, because there's been moments before where it's done something or picked something up it wasn't supposed to, and I've turned around and gone, oh, F you, and then went and moved about my business. It made me feel better.
I've called her names.
Yeah,
I've called her names of the 4-letter variety. And I don't mean love.
So, Stephen, though, again, I have to ask you a question. Is it possible to upbring a rude kid in Canada?
Yeah, it is. We got plenty of them up here. And by plenty of them, I mean me. I was raised at one point and I'm rude.
See, you're the sole aberration in the entire country of Canada.
Yes, I made my own political party and everything. So there you go. But there's your extra for the week. If you have a piece of news that you want us to talk about, please do get in touch with us through any of the ways. You can always give us a call at 567-343-GEEK or send us a text message. That's 567-343-4335. Head on over to twitter.com/GonnaGeek or go to facebook.com/GonnaGeek. Just let us know. And also, if you are over on Facebook, you should send us a special message there that says, "Hi, SP," because SP is not on Facebook and he'll never see it. But
sad.
Let's go ahead and move on to SP's Laptop Symposium. Here we go.
Ooh.
Guys, like 3 years ago, I was running into an issue where my laptop just wasn't cutting it for podcasting anymore. It really wasn't.
Well, did you buy the knife edition? If you wanted to cut something, like it should have the knife attachment.
Well, if Kershaw did make a laptop, I might actually buy it. But no, I didn't, because I have a lot of Kershaw knives, for those that don't know. I just like the quick speed open. Speed Safe, I believe it's called. Anyway, so I bought it 3 years ago for podcasting. It was Windows 7 at the time. I have upgraded it to Windows 10 when that came along, did the free upgrade with it. It was i7 5th generation, I believe, processor, and had 16 gigabytes of memory and not the best graphics card in it, if I recall, but it was better than just an integrated card. And the thing's been pretty serviceable, but I realized when I started having problems with it, and I realized, man, it's about 3 years old. And if I want to stay podcasting with all the 1080 video that we do, if I want to keep using the machine when I'm out with my drone and do 4K video, I'm going to have to up my game a little bit. I mean, it's not a bad machine, but I need to up my game. And it had problems. Now, the original laptop that I had, 17-inch laptop, it had only a 1 terabyte 2.5-inch hard drive in it when I got it. I upgraded it to 2 terabytes because I needed 2 terabytes of storage in it. Probably going to have to upgrade it to 4 terabytes really soon. But then a couple of months ago now, this was back in March, I started having some problems. It wouldn't update Windows. So it wasn't this latest creators update, but it was an update a couple times ago. And this seemed to be a known quantity. And it said, don't worry, wait for the next update and it'll be fine. This is kind of a pain because every week, every couple of days, really, it would go through we have a new update to install. Do you want to install this? I'm like, fine. And with one drive, a 2 terabyte drive, that's 5,400 RPMs, it is not going fast. So the shutdown, the turn back on, trying to sync my iPods, because I manually sync an iPod Nano and iPod Classic every day because I take them to the gym and to work. It was just becoming too time cumbersome. Like, okay, I need to update this thing. I need to upgrade it to a SATA drive or a SSD drive or whatever. So when this problem started happening, and it's 3 years old, and I'm doing 4K video now with the drones, I'm like, I need to upgrade. So I looked around. I looked at the normal sites that we do for our gear, our PCs, hardware, and that sort of thing. And my regular sites that I look at are Woot, Slick Deals, Newegg, and Best Buy. And largely I'm looking for refurbished because I know I can get the best capability for a little less dollars. So this is not state of the art. It's probably about a year old or at least 6 months old, but I'm not paying $2,000 for it. I paid $850 for it. And I found one on Woot. And actually, Chris, you're working on a refurbished machine right now, right? Your machine, your podcast?
This is a refurbished machine I bought direct from Dell, and they were clearing a bunch of stuff out. It was a great deal when I bought it 2.5 years ago or whatnot.
It's still longer than
strong.
That. Yeah, because we bought my Dell. I bought about the same time that you bought yours. Slightly different because you actually have a better capability in yours, which we'll talk about in a second. Anyway, so I went ahead and I found this gaming HP Omen laptop, and I bought it on Woot for about $850. It was a great deal. It had 17-inch monitor on it. It had 16 gigabytes of RAM, which is the same that I was giving up. It had an improved GTX 1050 4 gigabyte graphics card. It had an i7 7th generation 7700 quad core processor. And here's the kicker. Here's the thing that I really was looking for. It had an SSD in the form of a PCIe drive for the OS and a storage drive. I'm like, that's going to be it. I'm going to get it. The problem was the SSD only had 128 gigabytes, and I know from past experience I was going to have to upgrade that. And the storage drive was only a 1 terabyte. So I thought, well, worst case scenario, I could take the 2 terabyte drive out of the old one and throw it in this one. In the best case scenario, I'll get another one. And that's what I did. I got another 2 terabyte drive. So now starts the upgrade hell. And this has been about 10 days of just hell. So what I did is I found one of these new M.2 drives. I'm going to hold it up for the video user. And as you can see, it's about the size of a USB stick. Let me run through.
Weeny.
I know. Let me run through how this thing came to be. So way back when in the 90s, we had basically IDE drives. So this format, 3.5-inch IDE drives, was introduced roughly in 1994. Yes, there was other iterations leading up to it, but 1994, the current hard drive, that format that we've been dealing with for the last 25 years was born. And I'm holding one up for the camera right now on YouTube, so you can go and check that out. So along the time, this is basically analog connections, little pin connections. So to speed things up, there was another connection technology that was developed in the early 2000s. It was introduced in 2000, and the first actual functional drive came out in 2003. It's the SATA drive, or the serial ATA drive. So it was the same 3.5-inch drive. It just had more of a digital connection that was definitely the same, or an increase in speed. And these both 3.5-inch form fit drives that would go into the same bays on your computer, basically taking up about the same spot on a desktop that a CD player or DVD player would. So fast forward just a few more years, and then you got smaller drives, 2.5-inch drives that had the SATA connection into them. And that's what made modern laptops possible. Is, yes, you still had these with the IDE connection, but they were really slow. And so to keep up with the modern programming, you had to get up to the SATA drives. So those came about in the mid 2000s as well. In 2009, solid state hard drives came about, and Micron actually introduced them. And these are the same 2.5-inch fit form that were the hard spin drives, but they're just a card in there. They're just solid state storage. There's no moving parts. There's pluses and minuses. The plus is a heck of a lot faster, because the fastest you can get one of these hard drives, economically anyway, is about 7,200 RPMs. These are just much faster. The problem with these is they're more expensive, so you can't get as much storage in the same fit form, and they have problems with a lot of read write. So if you're doing a lot of work on one, they might fail. And when they fail fast. So you got to make sure you back these up oftentimes to a spin drive that's an external USB drive, right? Or a home data array or something like that. So we've evolved over the course of 15 years from that 3.5-inch IDE drive to this 2.5-inch SATA drive. And then now we have these, in 2013, these little M.2 drives, basically, which is based on PCIe technology. Now, the real reason that I wanted to start doing this segment, and Steven talked to me about talking about it on the podcast, was to say not all of these are the same. They come in different sizes. You have the sizes of a 2230, which is 22 millimeters by 30 millimeters. You have 2242, which is 22 millimeters by 42 millimeters, 2260, 2280, and 22210. So there's different sizes. So if you're going to replace one of these in your actual computer, or maybe your computer has a slot for this M.2 drive, got to make sure you get the right size that will fit in there, because you will have to secure it with a single screw. So you got to make sure it fits right in there. Now, the M.2 is formerly known as the Next Generation Form Factor, or NGFF. It was a specification that was developed in 2013 for internally mounted computer expansion cards and associated connectors. It replaces the M.SATA standard, which uses the PCI Express mini card, physical card layout, and connectors. I kind of skipped over that. In 2011, the M.SATA drives, which was basically a 2.5-inch card, were developed for M.SATA standard. And then these M.2 drives came out just a couple years later, and these have now been developed as the industry standard. It is why your Surface computers, what do you call it? Surface laptop, Chris? Is that what you call it?
I have a Surface Book.
Surface Book, or your new MacBooks, or your new thin Windows PCs, whatever. This is why they are like that, because you can get a lot of storage in just basically, this is the same size as my finger, is how big these are. So the problem was it only came with 128 gigabytes, and I wanted more. It's affordable now to get 500 gigabytes in this form factor. So I went out not knowing what it was. I noticed that this was a PCIe card in the description to my computer. I did not open the computer up, and I bought a 512 gigabyte PCIe M key, and I thought that was going to be great. Well, unfortunately, it's not. Okay, so let's get into the M key, because these actual connectors have two slots, and this is a B and M. I'm holding it up to the camera right now, but there's two slots in it, and it's a B slot and an M slot. And you can get these with just the B slot. You can just get them with the M slot, or you can get them combined with a B M slot, and they're called M key, B key, or B plus M key. Let me give you a little hint. Do not, unless you specifically know that you need this, do not buy an M key. Why? Because you will never find anything that you'll be able to connect it into your computer and initialize it as a bootable drive. I've tried. I bought several different adapters and trying to make it work. It did not work. So if you're going to do this, do yourself a favor. Don't get an M key. Do yourself a favor and get a B plus M key, because they're more universal. And more importantly, any adapter that you buy, like a USB adapter, you can plug in, and then you can initialize it as a main bootable drive, or MBR drive, and you can go forward with that, which eventually is what I had to do. I had to shelve the M key one that I bought, and I bought another B plus M key 500 gigabyte blue what was a Western Digital drive. And that's what I actually converted into there, because one of the adapters worked. So I was able to initialize the drive and then clone it. Okay, here's another thing. What I was used to, and I know different people have used different cloning programs before, but Clonezilla wasn't going to work for this, because I've heard that Clonezilla has a problem with SSD drives. I don't even know if it can handle M.2 drives. So I went searching around, and I found a lot of sites recommending this program called Macrium Reflect Free, which again is not Clonezilla, but it works pretty good, because you can actually put a backup, an image onto your drive, and you can restore from that image, or you can clone the drive straight away as long as it's initialized as a bootable drive. So that's what I use to clone the drive, is a Macrium Reflect Free. So if you're looking for a cloning program, I can recommend Macrium Reflect Free. And I know, Stephen, you've used something as well. Do you remember what it's called?
I don't off the top of my head, sorry.
Okay. So if we can think of that in the future, we'll talk about it. So I get this clone. It was a 128 gigabyte drive cloned onto a 500 gigabyte drive. Now I have all that free unallocated storage, and all I have to do is expand that C drive, right? Extend the C drive? No, can't do it. It's actually a common problem. So if you're listening to this and you work on computers all the time, you're like, yeah, I know what happened. What happened was, when I cloned it over, I had the bootable portion of the drive first. Then I had the C drive. And then it was the HP factory, restore, which is, you can't get into it. And that was right there on the right side of the C drive. And then there was unallocated space. In order to extend the drive to unallocated space with a bootable drive, it has to be directly to the left. So I was screwed. Now, I could have tried to wipe the drive and recloned all over, but I found this program called AOMEI Partition Assistant. And what I did is it went in, it moved that restore partition in front of the C drive, and then allowed me to extend the volume for the rest of the 500 gigabytes. So that was a lot of work that I had to do just to get this thing functional. I have not loaded any programs onto it yet. I have not transferred my daily driving syncing to that laptop yet, but that'll be coming by next weekend. But that was a lot of work just to get a new laptop up to spec.
Yeah, that's crazy. What a headache. What a pain. And I got to say that AOMEI, I've used their backupper tool before, and it is amazing. It's free. I think, Chris, you actually once used it. I think I sent it your way, and it will clone while your Windows is booting. It'll do a solid job. Your Windows is actually running, and you're cloning the drive that you're using. It does a really good job. I've been very impressed with it. The backupping. So that's great to hear the partition software also worked well.
I did try to use Ease US, and that didn't work to actually extend the drive. For some reason, it didn't work. But Chris, you've used the AOMEI Partition Assistant before, right?
Yes, I've used it before. Back when I was doing my Windows 10 upgrade and I didn't want to get stuck. I wanted a way to roll back. I put a second hard drive in this computer that I literally just cloned my C drive to, and I could flip over to that if I needed to. At this point in time, I think I've repurposed what's on that drive for other things. But at the time, I was scared to transition from Windows 8 to Windows 10 because there were a crap load of horror stories.
Mm-hmm.
Well, and I think they're still continuing because this is a public service announcement that if you have a lot of storage on your drive, you might want to think about getting an operating system drive in there. And if you have a laptop and you have a normal spin drive, you might want to look into one of these and put it in as your operating system drive, because then if it goes bad, like Windows 10 has been going bad a lot lately, then you can just go back, go to either a past image or reinstall Windows 10 on here and not affect your data.
Yeah, that's what I do. That's how I always run it. Is my SSD is just for the OS. But I learned a lot through your problems that you have. I got to say, it was I know you had a lot of issues, but first time I saw M.2 was when I bought built my new computer a few years ago, right? Like when I built a computer a few years ago, I had come across this, like, what is this M.2 slot? And I was like, oh, that's really cool. And that was 3 or 4 years ago. So really neat to see you using it. I've not really known anybody to use it firsthand, but it sounds like you got to make sure you get the right keys.
Right. So you do know somebody that's been using it for a couple of years, because Chris's machine, I mentioned that Chris and I bought our machines about the same time. The difference is Chris actually has an early version of this. I think it's only 32 gigabytes, but you have one of these in your computer.
Yes, it's 32 gigabytes. It's basically used. There's some Intel app that's built into it that uses it for quick switching. So it puts a bunch of the data that I'm currently using. So in my case, probably my browser and stuff like that, that's all sitting on the solid state drive. And then it swaps things out depending on what I'm doing. So
okay,
if I'm playing a game, I'm sure it loads that stuff, moves that stuff over there temporarily. Who knows? It's supposed to make things more efficient. I don't notice a difference 9 times out of 10. I've disabled it before just to see what happened and didn't really change much. It's a cache drive for me.
Is that in the BIOS or is that in the Windows 10 programming?
There is a Intel RST service that I had to download that does all that. And actually, it's not running right now, evidently. I'll look at that while we're talking about it. Hopefully my computer doesn't crash because I just opened this service.
All right. Well, before we get off of this, I got a question for you. What went wrong during your purchase?
During the purchase? Nothing went wrong during the purchase.
Something has to have gone wrong because you said it was an Omen.
That's right. Omens are pretty hefty duty gaming machines.
I was making a joke about the fact that after you bought it, things went wrong. So you bought it was an Omen.
It was an Omen, right?
Yeah, you see what I did there.
Things didn't go wrong until I tried to upgrade it, by the way.
Well, I'm glad you got it working, even though it did cost you money and you had to go and buy second drive. Maybe you'll find something to do with that one eventually.
Probably send it up to you to wreak havoc on your computers.
All right, so there you go. We're towards the end of the show. Before we wrap up, we'll remind you that we're part of the Gonna Geek Network. If you're not familiar with the Gonna Geek Network, we have a bunch of amazing geeky podcasts on there. If you have a geeky podcast and you're interested in joining a podcast network, head on over to GonnaGeek.com/join. We are looking for people to apply. There is a review process. We don't accept everything, but we always are happy to grow the Gonna Geek family. And this week, we got a new addition to the Gonna Geek family. It is the On the Bubble podcast. This was a really exciting application. SP, I'll let you talk a bit about On the Bubble because you've onboarded Josh. You've done a whole bunch of stuff with Josh. Why don't you go ahead and give the first plug for On the Bubble?
I will gladly take that first plug for On the Bubble. So On the Bubble is actually created and hosted by Joshua C. Liston. It's our second Australian-based podcast on the network, but Josh has a special place in Australian podcasting because he started the Australian Facebook group for podcasters, as well as he's involved in some of the awards of Australia for podcasting. So this is a big, and also he does the Podcaster Survival Guide, which is a podcast about podcasting, much like Better Podcasting is really akin to what we do. So really excited to have him on board the network. The podcast that he brought on board the network was On the Bubble. It actually looks at shows, TV shows, as they are in the process of being canceled, or it's retrospectively looking at them in the process of getting cancels and the fans' efforts to save these shows. So all that heart and sweat and worry and internet petitions that fans go through to try to keep their shows, Josh is actually documenting it show by show. The first episode that he brought on the network was about Marvel's Most Wanted, which, if you didn't know, was supposed to be a spinoff for Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. It did not happen. They shot a pilot, and now there is a fan swelling to get that pilot actually out and viewable, and that is what Josh is talking about. So go check out that episode On the Bubble, and you can find that at GonnaGeek.com.
So welcome aboard, Josh. We are very happy to have you. Chris, is there anything that you would like to plug or promote?
Well, that's what I was going to promote too. So I'm just going to echo what SP said. Go check out On the Bubble podcast. You're really going to enjoy it. Going back in the back catalog, there's some pretty cool shows you can look and go, I remember that one, and you can learn more about the process to potentially have saved them or the fans' support of it.
SP, is there anything else that you would like to plug or promote?
I said it before during this podcast. I'll say it again. Legends of S.H.I.E.L.D. episode 240, when it comes out later this week, will be all about the Legends of S.H.I.E.L.D. crew's response and review of Avengers Infinity War. So go check that out. Actually, the live versions are still on our YouTube feed and on my Spreaker feed, so you can go check that out at any time. Once again, that's Legends of S.H.I.E.L.D. episode number 240.
Awesome. So for episode 238 of the official GonnaGeek.com show, I'm Stephen John Drew saying, am I really? Maybe I'm just a person that wears a mask and changes the entire plot of Arrow. Sorry, I had to rant.
And I'm SP saying, stick with me for another week and we'll go through another space symposium.
And I'm Chris saying, I need a bigger hard drive in my head.
Bye.
Thanks for checking out another episode of the official GonnaGeek.com show. If you like the show, please give us a 5-star review in Apple Podcasts or a thumbs up on YouTube. You can always join us for our live recording sessions, which stream Mondays at 8:45 p.m. Eastern at www.geeks.live. And remember, you can find our full back catalog at GonnaGeek.com/show. If you're itching for more geeky content, check out other shows on GonnaGeekNetwork.com. Voice work was by Emily Prokop of The Story Behind podcast. That's it for this episode. We hope to see you back again next week.